My next guest on the program is Labor MP Anne Aly, joining us for the first time post-election after, a bit of a nail-biter for you, Anne Aly. But I do want to get on to, politics moves on, and John Setker's in the news at the moment. What's your position on whether he has a role to play in the Labor movement?
Oh, I think, well, first of all, good morning, Tom, and it's great to be back. But I think Mr Setker's position, it's very clear, has become untenable. And I think that, already he's been asked, there are moves to expel him from the Labor Party. And I don't want to preempt any of the final outcomes here, but I expect that they will go through and he will be expelled from the party. What happens within the union movement now, with several unions and Sally McManus in particular also calling for him to step down, I think we just have to wait and see what happens in that regard.
But Labor's made it very clear, and Anthony Albanese's made it clear, that he wants him out of the ALP. Is it tenable for that to happen and the ALP to still have an affiliation with the union and get money from it?
Well, I think the affiliation with the unions goes back to the first days, the very inception of the Labor Party, and I think that's a relationship that will continue. This is really about one person, and that's Mr Setker, and some of the things that he said and some of the actions that he's taken. I don't think that is indicative of the entire union movement. His actions and his words or the values that he espouses certainly aren't
maybe not the
indicative
whole
of the
union movement, but his members have backed him in, rank and file members. The union leadership have as well within the CFM, MEU and Victoria. So it's not one man, it's the whole union. Well,
I think that's something up to the union. Don't have a union background. I'm not entrenched in the union movement, so these are processes that I'm not familiar with. I don't think that his actions are indicative of an entire union movement, and certainly not even the CFM MEU and the values that they espouse and the good work that they've done, along with other parts and other members of the union movement as well. So I think, it's really just a matter of waiting to see how this plays out, but I do think that his position is untenable.
Should the ACTU consider expelling the union?
That's up to the ACTU. I don't know if that's an option for them. I don't know if it's possible. Again, that's something that would have to be within their rules or within their imprimatur. So I'm not familiar with what that is, and that's something that really is up to the ACTU. I think the point to be made here is that Labor and Anthony Albanese have made it very, very clear that the values espoused by Mr Setker, particularly in the remarks that he made with regard to Rosie Batty, are not the values that we welcome within the Labor movement.
Is that a problematic thing to base this on, though, given a lot of people have said that they don't believe there was any denigration of Rosie Batty nor her actions by John Setker in that meeting, and there's no public record of it?
Yeah, and I've heard that point, and I do understand the point that's being made by that, but I would also draw attention to the context as it is now, and the fact that this situation has moved on and has evolved, and that it's evolved to a position now where we have other unions, including Sally McManus and other unions as well, calling for Mr Setker to step down, not just on the basis of those remarks, but on the basis of other actions and a history of some pretty questionable behaviour as well.
All right. I want to ask you about the income tax cut, because you've come out with some of your colleagues in WA. I might call this the Perth Pact. You basically don't want Labor to support the full package.
The government is saying that they have a mandate for the full package of the tax cuts, and they may well argue that, but I would say I also have a mandate. I've been elected by the people of Cowan to represent them to the best of my ability for the next 3 years. Labor has always said we'll support the immediate tax relief that's going to make life easier for people, particularly in the current economic environment, the current economic conditions, and particularly in a situation where we've had zero to no wage growth. And where people are doing it tough. But to ask us to support tax cuts that are to come into action in 2 elections' time, I'd want to know what is the cost and what is the impact for the people that I represent in Cowan. I want to know what is both the monetary and the real cost of these tax cuts that are to come in place in 2025,
right.
or whenever it is. Because, Tom, I want to see schools properly funded, and I want to see hospitals properly funded. I want to see our pensioners get a better deal and our vets get a better deal.
Okay,
and
Labor made its priorities clear in the
things.
election. The final element comes into place in 2024, which is in 1 election time rather than 2, given we've just had an election. But what about this talk of not enough information? This was in the budget. Treasury has laid out the details of this. What actually is missing?
Well, what's missing for me is what is it going to cost in terms of what do you have to cut in order to make up the revenue deficit from these tax cuts? In principle, I'm all for tax cuts, but I'm not about to make a decision based on a lack of information about what is the actual cost going to be for the people that I represent.
But what we've had so far is this plan in the budget still, on the trajectory of increasing health and education funding, and this is what Treasury's outlining. I mean, are you casting doubt on the figures laid in the budget themselves?
But what about the fact that our economy is in a recession, or it looks like it's going into a recession? How do we know what the economy is going to look like in 2024 and whether or not these are affordable? I'd want a bit more information about exactly how this is going to impact on the people that I represent before I support future tax cuts. Very happy to support tax cuts now that are going to give immediate tax relief to people, but I want a bit more information before I take that final step.
It's a big call to say we're going into recession, Anne Aly. What do you base that on?
Well, it's very obvious that the economy is not doing as well as the government would have had us believe. You've got figures coming out of the RBA. You've got the interest rate has gone down again. Maybe a recession is a big thing to say, but certainly the economy is not doing as well. And you don't need to go far to see the impact of that, Tom. Talk to people every day. They're doing it tougher than they have been in the past. Wages are stagnant. The cost of living is much higher.
But you don't think it's a bit dangerous to talk about going into a recession?
Sorry?
You don't think it's a bit dangerous to talk about that we're about to go into a recession?
Well, I think that there are people who have already said that. I think that there are indications that are out there that the economy is not doing well. A recession could be on the cards, and I think it's something that we need to talk about and take into account when we're making decisions.
Anne Aly, always appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.